Today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, the anatomy of power, concentrated power. We're not just here to, talk about successful businesses. We're really dissecting the strategies, the old ones and the new ones, that let a very small number of people build up extreme wealth, wealth on a scale that actually changes society, changes geopolitics.
That's right. And this deep dive, it's a bit different because we're pulling from such varied sources. You've got 19th century biographies,
Yeah.
railroad barons cutting deals in smoky rooms,
Right.
all the way to modern analysis of algorithmic trading, AI's impact on the economy. We're looking for the common threads, the playbook, if you will.
And the sources, they really do show this continuous line, don't they? Ruthless efficiency, getting that proprietary edge. So our mission here is to pull out those key strategies, the legal ones, the tech ones, and let's be honest, the morally flexible ones
Definitely flexible.
that let individuals gather power on just this unprecedented scale.
And ultimately, we want to give you a shortcut to understanding what happens next. The tensions in society that result. What are the massive implications for inequality, for work, for democracy itself? When power gets built up, not just to win, but really to wipe out chaos, friction, and, crucially, any real competition.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we had algorithms, before VCs, the 19th century titans, they really established a playbook, didn't they? It was defined by, fanatical efficiency and total control. And maybe we start with Cornelius Vanderbilt. Here's a guy who saw infrastructure, railroads, not just as a utility, but almost like a weapon.
Oh, absolutely. Vanderbilt kind of set the standard for using political and financial clout together.
Yeah.
And often with this really cynical view of how the system worked. There's a great example in the sources, him fighting the Collins Bill in Congress. Publicly, he argued it was a source of corruption.
So wait, he's openly saying political manipulation is just part of the deal, even while he's trying to manipulate the outcome himself.
Yeah,
That's
It is. It's almost like he's calling out the foul before he commits one or stops someone else from using it against him, naming the corruption to control it.
right.
And that need for total control, it went right down into the operations. The sources talk about his son, William, and how he showed that same kind of unilateral power in a really key deal for the Hudson River Railroad.
Yeah, he wasn't even fully authorized, was he, when he went to Albany?
Yeah.
But he spotted a weakness, saw the Central Board was planning to rely on the People's Line for freight.
Exactly. He saw the opening. And William countered their plan with just this incredibly aggressive financial move. He offered, get this, $100,000.
Wow, back then.
A massive sum for the Hudson River Railroad to get the Central's freight business year-round. This wasn't just a bid, it was pure financial muscle, a huge, unilateral show of force designed to lock up dominion over moving goods immediately, all year. It massively strengthened his father's position against rivals. That kind of decisive, overwhelming money move, that became the signature of that whole industrial conquest era.
Okay, so moving from railroads, physical infrastructure, to industrial production, Andrew Carnegie. He gives us another angle, maybe even darker, on how to achieve that kind of dominance. We know him as the great philanthropist, right? But the sources show he deliberately kind of cleaned up his early history.
Yeah, Carnegie was very sensitive about how he made his first millions. The sources really stress this. He downplayed his years as a bond salesman in his autobiography because, frankly, they involved deals that were morally, if not legally, questionable. He much preferred the story of the self-made factory man, not the financial operator.
And we have proof of those operations, right?
Well-
Specific lawsuits. He got sued more than once. But that 1874 suit from Dr. Samuel H. Melvin, that sounds like it lays out a blueprint for financial collusion way before modern regulations. What exactly was the scheme there?
Well, the charge in the Melvin suit was pretty explicit. Collusion between Carnegie and two big brokerage firms, the Morton firms. The whole idea was basically to cheat local stockholders out of $400,000, which was enormous money then.
400,000.
Yeah. So Carnegie, using his insider position and control, allegedly sold these Gilman Railroad bonds to the Morton firms way below the actual market value.
Okay.
Then the Morton firms, they just turn around and sell them immediately at the real price for a huge profit, which, the suit claimed, they then secretly split with Carnegie and his partner.
So it's a setup.
Yeah.
He uses his inside track to siphon profits away from the small guys, gives it to a big Wall Street firm, and gets a big kickback himself. That's not just being clever. That's actively engineering illegal gains using private information.
It's basically financial engineering dressed up as bond trading. But, despite that ruthlessness, Carnegie was also a brilliant judge of talent. And getting the right people also required these very strategic, tailored deals.
That's right. His ability to grow, to scale up, really depended on getting Henry Clay Frick, the top guy in the Coke industry.
Huh.
And the deal Carnegie cut to get him, that was like pure genius for motivating someone.
He knew he needed the ablest executive in Coke, and Frick was the one. So Carnegie offers him a 2% stake in Carnegie Brothers. But here's the kicker, what made it revolutionary. That 2% stake, which made Frick incredibly rich, needed absolutely zero down payment.
No money down. How?
The whole cost was just deducted from Frick's future profits. So it locked Frick in totally. His loyalty was secured, and he was completely invested personally in making the company grow like crazy. His fortune depended entirely on its success.
That really shows how power isn't just about brute force, but also about strategically aligning incentives, making people want what you want. But then, of course, there's the dark side of that relentless drive, the Homestead strike, that huge, violent clash.
Yeah, and when that tragedy happened, Carnegie was conveniently far away. He trusted Frick to handle it, but when you look at his reaction detailed in the sources, it's cold. He avoided writing about it. Sure, he was appalled by the deaths, but mainly, it seems, because of the bad press and the resistance it caused.
Wait, so the actual human cost, the core labor dispute?
Yeah.
That wasn't his main issue.
Apparently not. When he shared his thoughts privately, he zeroed in entirely on Frick's tactical mistakes. He blamed Frick for two grievous errors. First, trying to land the Pinkerton agents by boat, which he saw as just militarily dumb. And second, starting production again too soon with replacement workers, scab labor, which just poured fuel on the fire.
So it was about flawed execution, bad tactics, not the fundamental morality of crushing the strike.
Exactly. His focus was on the operational failure, the flawed strategy, not the human consequences of his industrial machine. It really shows how, for him, operational victory trumped everything else.
That distinction. Caring about efficiency and maybe optics, but not the core ethics, that feels like a perfect bridge to the modern era, actually.
Yeah.
Because the goal stays the same, get that proprietary edge, whatever it takes.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating now is how that old drive for proprietary edge shifts. It moves from controlling physical things, railroads, steel mills, to controlling information. The 21st century titans, they swap iron and coal for data and speed, and they create these winner-take-all situations that are maybe even more concentrated than back in Carnegie's day.
And you see that obsession with pure speed, like literally turned into money in high-frequency trading, right? Where a tiny fraction of a second, a microsecond, is worth fortunes.
Oh, totally. There's that incredible line in the source material about the value of speed. Traders who would sell their grandmothers for a microsecond, 1/1,000,000th of a second. That tiny, tiny time advantage, that's their whole proprietary edge, is what decides who makes the profit and who gets systematically picked off by the faster players.
It's not about building the best widget over a year anymore. It's about reacting milliseconds faster. And the sources actually define this, right? They label specific types of trading as basically unfair, enabled purely by speed.
Yeah. They identify three main types. The first is electronic front-running. This is basically the old predatory trick, just updated for computers. Imagine a big pension fund trying to buy a huge block of stock across multiple exchanges. This happened to Brad Katsuyama, the guy who started IEX.
Right.
The high-frequency trader sees that buy order starting on one exchange, and they literally race ahead of it electronically to the next exchange. They buy up the stock there first, knowing the big order is coming, and then sell it back to the slower institutional buyer at a slightly higher price. They're using speed to profit from knowing what someone else is about to do.
So they're arbitraging the information delay across the system because they're faster.
Precisely. Then the second type is rebate arbitrage. Exchanges actually pay firms tiny rebates, like kickbacks, for providing liquidity, basically, for posting buy and sell orders to make the market thicker. High-frequency firms figured out they could just post quotes, cancel them almost instantly, post new ones back and forth super fast. They collect the rebates without actually providing the stable, reliable liquidity the exchange intended. They're essentially gaming the incentive system.
Sneaky. And the third one, the sources say this is the biggest one.
Yeah, slow market arbitrage. This is apparently where more billions of dollars are made than the other two combined. It's the constant, everyday grind of profiting from tiny time differences. See, information doesn't heat all the dozens of U.S. stock exchanges at the exact same microsecond. There are tiny delays.
Right. Physics.
Exactly. So if a super fast trader sees the price of, say, Procter & Gamble drop 10 cents on the New York Stock Exchange, They can use their speed advantage to instantly sell PNG on other exchanges before those other exchanges have officially registered the price drop from NYSE. They're arbitraging the lag inherent in the system itself, turning tiny time gaps into massive profits over and over all day long.
And that velocity, that speed advantage, it's now bleeding out from just finance into the whole global economy through AI, right? The sources suggest this is going to create massive wealth concentration, especially US and China.
Yeah, the key point there is the speed of this change, this shift to an AI-driven economy. It's going to be way, way faster than anything before. Think about the Industrial Revolution that unfolded over, what, 3 to 5 generations?
Yeah.
It gave society, laws, labor practices time, albeit painful time, to adjust. The sources warn the AI revolution will hit hard within a single generation, and it's supercharged by 3 catalysts that just didn't exist back in the 19th century.
Okay, this is crucial. What are those 3 accelerators? Why so much faster?
Well, first, you've got the exponential explosion of data and computing power. We just have vastly more data, the fuel for AI, and the specialized processors like GPUs to handle it. That's ingredient number 1. Second, huge breakthroughs in the AI algorithms themselves. Deep learning, neural networks. These things can do tasks now, like understanding language or recognizing complex patterns that were science fiction just a decade or 2 ago.
Okay, data and better algorithms. What's the third piece? The delivery mechanism.
Exactly. Global connectivity and the cloud. The instant an AI breakthrough happens in some lab in Silicon Valley or Beijing, it can be deployed globally, almost instantaneously, through cloud platforms. You don't need to build factories. You don't need to lay railroad tracks. There's no physical friction slowing down the rollout. This immediate worldwide distribution, it just dramatically shrinks the timeline for economic impact and potentially job losses.
Wow. So it's not like waiting for textile mills or assembly lines to spread. It's instant deployment, global scale. And that speed doesn't just bring efficiency. The sources warn it guarantees massive social disruption, job displacement happening in this vanishingly short window of time.
And that velocity means the modern tech titans had to adapt that old playbook, right? They took the 19th century focus on total control, that fanatical efficiency, and applied it to a world running on data packets. People like Bezos, Musk, Zuckerberg.
Right, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's start with Elon Musk. His drive for efficiency isn't just about tweaking processes. It's almost like operational extremism, questioning everything.
Yeah, there's that dramatic story in the sources, right, about optimizing the assembly line. He apparently gave his team just 72 hours
72 hours for what?
to remove every single machine from the production process that they couldn't absolutely justify keeping. Every unnecessary piece of equipment gone.
And he wasn't just directing from afar. He was like on the floor with spray paint.
Exactly. Walking the line with a can of orange spray paint. If a machine was questioned and the answer wasn't immediately convincing, he'd slap an orange X on it. And that meant tear it out now.
Wow. That's intense pressure.
And it reflects his whole leadership style, especially in a crisis. Friends said that when things got really bad, Musk felt he had to divorce himself from reality to find a way out, to escape disaster. It meant constantly stripping things down to their absolute essence, discarding anything extra. Even when production was actually surging, he might suddenly threaten to clean house and fire people.
Even when things were going well, why?
Not out of spite, apparently, but from this relentless need to ask, is this really the most efficient team possible? Could we be leaner, faster, constant questioning?
And that same ruthlessness, it clearly goes beyond the factory, into the legal battles, competition. His attitude during the Twitter takeover, that gives a pretty chilling glimpse into how he views competitive fights.
Oh, the language reported in the sources is incredibly aggressive towards the outgoing Twitter board and execs. He apparently insisted we're never going to give them a legal release and vowed to hunt every single one of them till the day they die.
Seriously, hunt them.
That was the reported language. Even after he'd agreed to buy the company, he was still considering suing them for fraud. It shows this desire for total dominance, not just in business operations, but using legal threats, intimidation, as tools to get absolute control over the outcome.
Okay, let's switch gears to Jeff Bezos. Amazon. Built on this unstore idea, right? Just fundamentally rejecting how physical retail works.
Yeah, the unstore concept was game-changing because it just ignored the old limits. Limitless shelf space, potentially, personalized interfaces for every customer, and critically, this radical commitment to transparency, which built trust. Amazon let negative reviews sit right next to positive ones. They put used items right alongside new ones. Things traditional retailers would never do. That trust became a huge competitive advantage.
And his big strategy shift to everyday low prices, that was inspired by meeting the Costco guy, right?
Yeah, Jim Sinegal, Costco CEO. Bezos met him in 2001, apparently came back totally convinced. He mandated Amazon match competitors' lowest prices consistently. The thinking was if Amazon neutralizes price as a factor, it wins automatically on its massive selection and sheer convenience. You never have to leave your house. It was about winning the long game by taking price off the table.
And making sure Amazon could handle the complexity of that massive scale. Bezos and his key lieutenant, Jeff Wilk, they used this kind of leadership by extreme example, the burning the boat story.
Right. Wilk deliberately created these high-pressure situations. He would actually reduce capacity in the fulfillment center sometimes.
Reduced capacity, that sounds counterintuitive.
Well, it forced the company to absolutely master the complexity of its existing systems, to squeeze every last bit of efficiency out of what they had. The source called it like Wilk had burned a boat in mid-voyage. There was no turning back, no easy option of just adding more warehouses. They had to solve the logistics puzzle with the tools they had or fail. It created that fanatical efficiency, that adaptability that Amazon's known for.
Okay. And finally, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, now Meta. His strategy seems focused squarely on two things: eliminating competition and locking in his own control forever.
His approach to potential rivals was definitely preemptive, aggressive. The sources point to the Instagram acquisition as a prime example. Instagram had just raised money at a $500 million valuation. Zuckerberg paid double that, $1 billion.
$1 billion? Why so much?
Not because he thought it was worth $1 billion then. It was purely strategic defense. He wanted to stop Instagram from growing into a powerful, separate social network that could threaten Facebook, especially if, say, Twitter bought it instead. Killing a future threat was worth paying a huge premium today.
Buying out the competition before it gets too big. And then ensuring his own power, even after going public. That feels like it connects right back to the control impulse of the old titans.
Absolutely. He set up that shareholder structure, similar to what Google did with Class B stock. That's the key mechanism for permanent control, the critical detail. Those Class B shares, held by Zuckerberg and his inner circle, they get 10 votes each. Regular common shares get 1 vote. So even if he sells off most of the company's actual equity, he and his allies always keep majority voting control. It puts his long-term strategic vision above what shareholders might want day to day. It secures his control over the company's destiny, basically forever.
Okay, so if we pull back and connect all this relentless drive for efficiency, for centralizing wealth, it leads straight into some major systemic problems, doesn't it? Big social, political challenges that kind of threaten the whole foundation.
Yeah, and Thomas Piketty's work on global wealth concentration really gives us the framework here. After all these generations since Vanderbilt and Carnegie, supposedly generations of progress, where are we actually at with wealth concentration?
It's pretty sobering when you look at the numbers. The current picture.
Yeah.
The poorest half of the world's population still owns basically nothing, next to zero wealth. Meanwhile, the richest 10% now own 2/3 of all global wealth. Now, okay, that's slightly less concentrated than the absolute peak before World War I, the Belle Epoque.
Right, when it was like 9/10.
But it's still a staggering imbalance, 2/3 in the hands of 1/10 of the people.
And that concentration, Piketty argues, is exactly what fuels political tension. Democracies kind of rely on this meritocratic hope, right? The idea that inequality is okay if it's earned through talent and hard work. But Piketty shows that when wealth from capital, stocks, bonds, property, now data infrastructure, when the return on that capital grows faster than the overall economy grows, that hope starts to fray.
This is his famous Duvall-G equation, right? The rate of return on capital is greater than the rate of economic growth. Can you just break down why that's so critical?
Sure. If the raw return on capital is consistently higher than DE economic growth, it means wealth that's already accumulated, whether it's inherited or previously earned, tends to grow faster just by sitting there than wealth earned through labor, like wages and salaries. So existing capital naturally compounds and concentrates faster than the economy expands, widening the gap without necessarily requiring a new innovation or effort from the owner.
And that extreme concentration, Piketty says, creates powerful political tensions when you set it against the ideal of professed equality of rights of all citizens.
And that leads straight into his warning. There's nothing inevitable stopping us from going back to those extreme Belle Epoque levels of concentration. especially if global growth slows down. And AI revolution seems poised to potentially pour gasoline on that fire. Exactly. Layered on top of that structural economic risk, you have this looming crisis of AI and work, which Kai-Fu writes about. The hyper-efficiency the Titans achieve leads directly, he argues, to massive social disorder, potential political collapse even, driven by widespread unemployment and just gaping inequality.
And it's not just about losing your paycheck. It's
Yep.
deeper, right?
Yeah.
A human crisis.
Absolutely. Lee argues the speed of automation hits us at a psychological level. For centuries, work has been central to how humans derive their sense of self-worth, their purpose, and that's being undermined, potentially, in this vanishingly short window of time. If algorithms can do what you do, but better, cheaper, faster, what does that mean for your sense of purpose? It's a profound question.
So, okay, if this efficiency creates this concentration and threatens mass unemployment, what's the proposed fix? The sources talk about a pretty bold idea, universal basic income, UBI, funded by the winners.
Yeah, the idea proposed is funding UBI through steep taxes on the winners of the AI revolution. So taxing the big tech companies, the legacy firms that adapt successfully, and the resulting millionaires, billionaires, and perhaps even trillionaires who capture the profits from automation. The goal is basically to redistribute some of the massive gains from hyper-efficiency back to the broader population whose labor value is potentially being eroded.
But even the idea of UBI itself, it's controversial, right? There are different philosophies about how it should work.
Oh yeah, big debates. It really splits into two main camps based on the goal. One camp argues for a relatively small stipend, maybe $10,000 a year, something like that. The idea there is to provide a safety net, but keep a strong incentive for people to still find some kind of work, even part-time or gig work, keep the labor market functioning. The other camp sees UBI differently. They argue for a much larger amount, enough to actually live on comfortably. This view envisions enabling a leisure society where people are freed from the necessity of work altogether, allowing them to pursue, creativity, community work, education, whatever they find meaningful. Big philosophical difference.
And finally, we see how these concentrated financial networks, this power, can intersect with geopolitics in really dangerous ways. The sources bring up the arms dealer Victor Bout as an example of this dark side.
Right. Bout's operation is a case study in how these powerful, often opaque financial networks operate outside the normal banking system, fueled by global conflict. His group mastered moving arms profits around and, crucially, getting paid not in easily tracked money, but in valuable commodities stripped from war zones. Things like diamonds from Charles Taylor in Liberia, emeralds from Afghanistan, and coltan from rebels in the Congo.
Coltan, what is that again?
It's this dull metallic ore, but when you refine it, you get tantalum. And tantalum is essential for capacitors, which are in basically every modern electronic device, phones, laptops, everything. So it's incredibly valuable and often mined in horrific conditions.
So it shows financial power operating almost like its own state, using conflict to generate untraceable wealth, maintaining influence globally.
And in more authoritarian states, that financial information itself becomes a weapon of control. Like in Russia, the sources describe Putin using the Financial Monitoring Agency, run by a close ally, Zubkov. Their job was to get exclusive knowledge about the flow of money in and out of the country's businesses. This inside financial intel was seen as invaluable in enforcing loyalty among the powerful oligarchs and rival financial groups that emerged after the Soviet collapse. Knowing where the money goes is power. Having exclusive knowledge is absolute control. Hashtag tag outro on job.
So, okay, wrapping this up, what does it all mean? It feels like the basic playbook. It hasn't fundamentally changed that much since Vanderbilt was strong-arming competitors for freight deals. It's still about getting that proprietary advantage, right? Whether that's a secret deal, a microsecond edge in trading, or guaranteed 10-to-1 voting shares. It's about maximizing efficiency, sometimes ruthlessly, and crushing or absorbing the competition.
Yeah, the core drive seems consistent. But the speed and the sheer scale of wealth creation now in the digital age with AI and data driving it, that introduces social risks that maybe weren't there or weren't as acute during the slower industrial revolution. And you see that value placed on control, absolute control across all these eras. Carnegie managing his partners meticulously, Bezos burning the boats to force adaptation, Zuckerberg hardwiring his voting power forever.
The lesson maybe is that the biggest winners, historically and now, are often the ones willing to basically reject the existing rules and build their own proprietary system, whether that system is railroads or finance or algorithms.
And that leaves us with, I think, a really critical, maybe provocative final thought from these sources. They strongly suggest that if these massive rewards from hyper-efficiency keep flowing overwhelmingly to just this Tiny sliver of winners, the modern trillionaires, potentially, we're not just risking more inequality, we might actually be undermining the core democratic idea of equality that these modern eras supposedly stand for. You really have to ask, can a system that relies on meritocratic hope actually survive when real control is locked down by things like 10-to-1 voting shares? When wealth accumulation is driven by the structural fact that capital outpaces growth, and when the biggest spoils go to those who operate at speeds the rest of us can't even perceive?